Yeah, my name's David Cornforth, farming the High Weald. I've farmed here for the last 30 years. We used to milk cows on an intensive system, and I just couldn't get out of the way of expanding. Just expand, expand. That was the theory, and we just found it wasn't working. Money, money was just not working. So I got out of the place. Spent a year in New Zealand. My family's in New Zealand, and came back and took up my electrician's tools. And then I just got, it was what I learned in New Zealand about rotational grazing. I just got back into it, started buying beef animals, and so we've basically been producing strong stores for the last 20 years, no, 15 years, yeah. And I just got into the soil and finding out how to farm without spending money, basically. And that's what I do, and it's just become a bit of a passion, really. Um, well, when I started restocking the farm after returning to New Zealand, I didn't have many animals, so I got a bit pissed off with trying to find a dozen animals twice a day on 120 acres. I used to keep them in a small area, electric fence, move them once a day. And then all of a sudden I realised, bloody hell, the grass is growing everywhere. And basically, I found I didn't need to house them anything like the 7 months that I was previously doing. And then we just started researching. Me and a friend, we started researching. We read various books, basically the one by Graham Harvey. And we learned about characters. He mentioned characters in North America who were doing this sort of mob grazing, and thought that's interesting. And we just went on the internet and researched them a bit more. I thought, well, what the hell, let's give it a go. And that's what I do. And then the results we found were just amazing, really. And yeah, it's just been a fantastic journey. And then I think the real turning point was listening to Elaine Ingham speaking at the Oxford Rail Farm Conference back in 2011, where she delved into the soil life and the microbes and living things in the soil. Whereas before, I learned about soil, it was just get the pH right, get the phosphate levels right, pile on the nitrogen, be careful with the potash. When you put the potash on, that's it, grow the grass. That's not like that at all, So basically that's what I do. I split the farm up, I put an electric fence system throughout the farm, so I've got electricity available at every point, anywhere on the farm. And I split the big fields up into corridors with straining posts 25 metres in from the headlands. And we just started grazing it in a ladder pattern, basically, going around the field. But what you notice when you do that, you start at one corner of the field, work through it gradually. By the time you get to the end, the beginning of the field's almost ready to graze again. Now, historically, when I kept my dairy cows, I would, it's grown again, let them eat it off. Now, no way, that grass is recovering. You mustn't touch that. If you graze that grass repeatedly, even though it looks like it's ready to graze, you weaken the roots, and you don't give the soil doesn't get recharged with energy from the plant. And yeah, so that's what we do. And I'm always looking now, what can I do? When you start doing this system, you realize your fields are not uniform. The soil is different. What's the soil's like here can be totally different from what the soil's like over there. And I think the old boys knew this. That's when they put the hedges in. Hedges were put in where the soil changed. And I've noticed on this farm in particular, hedges have been ripped out in post-war. You start to know your soils and you realise field is different everywhere, so it's got to be treated differently. And basically, that's what I do. I mean, always, it's all about observation, observation, observation. It's not about pH levels. It's not about this. It's all about observation. Why is that doing that today when it didn't do it yesterday? Well, graze this. Is it ready to graze for the cattle now? How hard does it need grazing? You're managing. I mean, the late Neil Dennis, who's farming North Dakota, I think it was, said you're managing complexity. You can't get it right. You can't get it right all the time. You're just managing this mishmash of nature, and it's really interesting. It's not, I can't bear to sit on a tractor for 3 hours. I cannot bear it. And in my early days, that's all I wanted to do. I remember being devastated back in the 70s. Father ordered a brand new David Brown, and back then the 3-day week was on the go, and the government was in trouble, and the manufacturers export everything. Never mind the farmers in this country. We want the balance of payment right. Dad ordered his tractor, 18 months, couldn't get it, and then 18 months, 2 years later, the dealer rang up. We've got your tractor, Mr. Cornforth, but he hasn't got power steering, and unfortunately it's doubled in price. So Dad, being his typical blunt Yorkshireman, said, stuff your tractor. But yeah, I was devastated. Can you imagine that 12-year-old? Been so looking forward to this lovely shiny new tractor with a safety cab and enclosed.
Yeah.
Cancel. And then I quickly realised that really, although if you're small, you can't keep up with the big boys. And to be honest, who wants to keep up with them? Because it basically, farming is a ladder, and the bottom rungs that keep falling off all the time. And if you want to keep on that ladder, you've got to climb fast. And I'm afraid it's not for me anymore. I mean, this ground it's very variable. It's heavy clay, and it won't tolerate being abused by steel for very long. Yeah. When I first moved here, I pulled up some permanent grass and thought, got a good crop of maize and got a fantastic crop of winter wheat with virtually any inputs. And the advisor said, blimey, the Yorkshiremen know how to grow wheat. Yeah, I did over 4 ton with very little inputs. The next year I tried to grow maize. It was a disaster. I tried to grow wheat. It was a crop failure. Within 2 seasons, I destroyed the soil. Looking back in hindsight, I destroyed the soil life, and it was just heavy clay. And because the subsidy, it was registered by Ajax in those days, and you could claim the subsidy. The subsidies, oh well, I keep growing it there, but it was just bloody ridiculous, really. You've got to farm with nature, not with what the government pays you. I would think learn to observe it, and research it on the internet. And I do remember I had a grazing meeting here, something like 10, 15 years ago, and the leading advisor for HDB or EBLEX as it was said, yeah, well, it might work here, might work in North America, David, but this is different ground here. It is different, but the principles are the same, and you've just got to research it with an open mind and give it a go. Just do a small part of your farm, and learn to observe. Do not just listen to someone and advise and say, do this, do that. Learn to observe your soil, and question why it's doing what it's doing, and try and find out why it's doing that. That's the most important tool you've got on a farm. You looking, digging the soil, observing the aggregations if you've got any, counting worms, doing worm counts, monitoring worm counts, looking at the soil roots and looking at the way they travel. If they're traveling horizontally, there's compaction there. And all right, compaction is a big thing, big mention in the arable world. The reason you've got compaction is you haven't got soil life to relieve that compaction. It's not causing a compaction in the first place. It's not having your soil life right. That's yeah. I mean, it's just it's basically got a wormhole you go down it once you get into it. But yeah, monitor your soil. Smells. You smell. You know you. You dig down and you smell this. Learn to smell the soil. If it smells rotten and smelly, going back to my time in New Zealand, we were setting up a dairy unit, and I was given the task of connecting up all the water troughs, digging the water pipes, and connecting up the water troughs. And I used to dig the soil there, bearing in mind there's high fertilizer. Back then there was high fertilizer applications. I smelt the soil and it smelt like rotting fish. Now, I didn't have a regenerative hat on then, and I thought, bloody hell, that's terrible, that. I don't know why it smells like that. Never thought any more about it. But I now realise they were highly anaerobic. And those compounds in the soil were basically killing everything. I came back from New Zealand, and the grazers out there at the time were really hard, and they graze the field hard down, took it right down the dirt. And when we came back, thinking that was harsh and it was tough on the cattle and bad for the soil, and I sort of moved away from that. And there was this thinking that came in around 10 years ago. Oh, you've got to trample a third, leave a third, and eat a third, which I tried to do, and I never actually quite managed it. Didn't matter what I did, I'd watch an animal graze, and you put them into long covers. A cow, I could watch a cow, and she'd put her head down and eat. She'd eat about 100 mouthfuls before she even moved, and she'd pick somewhere that she liked, and she'd eat it right down to the soil. I thought, oh. And then she'd wander off there and leave that bit there. So that bit wasn't getting grazed, and I thought, well, that's not really right. You want to eat a third of everything, and I found I couldn't achieve that in any way. And I've asked various people from America, Jeremy Elizondo in particular, and said, well, it's impossible. The only way you can get them to eat everything is to pack them in tight, but move them on and rest that ground. That's what I'm thinking now. So basically, I graze hard, move them on, monitor how the grass comes back after the grazing. Greg Judy always says, if you've got a paddock with grass with a square tip like that, grass isn't recovered. It's got to have recovered. And moving on, what I'm doing now is, if it's recovered, I work out the rest period it's had, then I double it. And the reason I double it is the grass is recovered, but you double the rest period again, it then pumps more stable exudates into the soil, which feeds the microbiology in the soil and increases soil aggregation. And that is what I think a lot of people haven't really got their head around, really. So that's what I do. So basically, when I start grazing now in the spring, I graze a field, move them on, or I graze cells, move them on, and I'm always watching for the growth behind them. And bearing in mind, spring grass growth normally, southeast, it seems to be not happening as much now. You struggle to keep the grass under control. But you look at where you've been, and if you're happy that it's regrazed, that it's ready to regraze, you go back to that and forget about that and rotate back. Now, the rain stops, the growth slows down. There's nothing we can do about that. If you find you're going back when the grass isn't ready, you then go into that stockpile that you abandoned. All the time monitoring what's growing behind you. So if it rains, you go back. If it rains, the grass will obviously grow and you go back and forget about what's ahead of you. And that is what a lot of people struggle with, because the likes of Greg Judy will say, you've got to get over all the grass quickly, skim over the top of it. That might work, but you're not increasing your soil. The benefits of leaving that grass is getting mature and is pumping more exudates in the soil, which is improving aggregation, which therefore improves water infiltration and air and gas exchange in the soil, which feeds the microbes. The microbes are like us. They need oxygen, they need water. So that is my thinking now, and I'm finding I'm able to keep a stockpile of a year-long stockpile, getting up to 30% of my ground, which I can then graze in the winter when it's wet, and the mature grass that has matured, sort of almost died and formed a mat, and then the autumn grass has come up through, provides a mat to graze in these wet winters. And I'm finding that's the only way you can cut down costs, cut down your housing costs. For this year, it was about 45 days. Depending on the weather forecast, I might get away with 20 days this year. Now, yeah. Basically, I'm trying to avoid this flipping transition period, which is sort of going wrong now because I've had to house them. If you can avoid a transition period, I think animal performance will improve. Can improve animal performance, but it is tricky.
And the transition is kind of referring to like the rumen, as in like
the rumen, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you can keep grass 365 going into them 365 days, I think you're on a winner then. Because I will be suffering now. Those 20 days they will go backwards. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, I mean, my prime focus now is on the soil. It's increasing the fungal-to-bacterial ratio in the soil. That is the advantage of leaving your stockpiling portions of the ground for long periods of the year. These exudates tend, as the plant has matured, it puts out oily and lipid exudates which are more stable and which the fungi need to break down. I've actually got the neighbour's done a flipping experiment.
Survey or something like that? Or
he's done a survey of all the reasons. We call him the Twitcher. He's really, there's his kitchen window up there, and he looks and he says, David, we've seen all sorts. We saw such and such the other day. I said, oh, really? I'll look it up and have a look at his survey. In fact, when we go back, we'll have a look.
Yeah. Great.
But yeah, I mean, my whole focus is now increasing the fungal life in the soil. To an extent, I've gone back into spending inputs. I'm trialling 40 acres with a product that contains 28,000 DNA strains of biology and fungal. It is expensive, but I just, as a bit of a giggle, I've not spent anything on inputs on my ground for 10, 15 years now. And I thought, well, I'd give it a try. I just see. 24, 26 months sometimes.
Yeah.
We sell them in the local market. I used to sell quite a few animals. I'd slaughter them and sell them as boxes when I was working part-time. Well, the situation with slaughterhouses is really quite worrying, really. And but I find if I don't spend any money on the cattle, it pays the bills basically, because I'm not spending. I've got very little machinery, very little. I have a loader. I have a tractor that hasn't turned a wheel for a year, and the tractor work I do is I get contractors in to do it, but I don't have much, Neighbour has a baler and he makes a bit of hay. I tend to favour buying in hay rather than making my own valuable grass into hay, which is really a low product, really. Typically I run about 45 cows and the calves, and the stores up to 24 months, so we tend to run about 115, 120 in the summer. We sell some stores in the autumn. We're probably back down to about 90 to 100.
And that's on 120 acres. That's quite impressive, carrying that amount of stock.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I suppose it is really, yeah. I could probably push it higher if I was going to spend 30, 40,000 on inputs, but I wouldn't be any better off, that's for certain. I'd be worse off.
And are you still using bat latches to move them multiple times a day, or?
I winter grazing, I'll probably move them twice, depending on the weather and the ground conditions. I may have to move them 3 times. In summer, when I'm grazing mature stockpiles in dry times, I'll move them 4 or 5 times a day with bat latches. And my reason for doing that is, after speaking to Alan Williams, when it's hot in summer, I don't move them till midday. And the reason for that is the Brix levels are higher in midday and the early afternoon than they are in the morning. And I've measured this with a refractometer. I've gone to a certain point at 9 o'clock and I've had a Brix of 9, 12 o'clock, the same place, the plants have got a Brix of 12. So basically, after speaking to Alan Williams, I've moved on to a system in the summer when big stockpiles, very high stock density, move them every hour in the afternoon for about 4 hours, 4 strands, and then let them then go back and move them again at 12 the following day. For 4 quick moves where they get the tips of the grass, which is high in sugar, where the maximum photosynthesis is taking place, and let them trample and whatever to those 4 cells, and then let them, so they fill up with high quality forage, and then they just ruminate and they're basically full. And if there's 4 strong eating periods during the day, they don't need to eat all the time. They can ruminate as and when they want. And so that's what that's what I do now. And yeah, and I think it seems to be working. Yeah, well, I know it's working. It's just, in the early days I used the bat latches a lot more, but that was to get maximum trampling, and the trampling was in a way to try and feed the soil life, to get everything to cycle. And that's what I thought. But what I'm finding is now I don't think I need to do that to the same extent. I can hit the ground hard and move on and just rely on the long rest periods to charge everything back up. I used to look on trampling as the fertilizer for the next crop. But that's maybe wrong, I don't know. But yeah, that's going back onto this fungal and bacterial ratio. I am experimenting with a product that I put in the compost in the yard manure when I do house, and I mix. We're trying to boost the flumming, put more life in the soil. But I'm basically, I'm 64 and I'm impatient. I want to see the ground improve more and more. You know, yeah.
Are you thinking about retiring yet, or are you?
Well, yeah, I am. But the problem is, I'm so interested in soil. I don't really want to retire. I couldn't, I couldn't bear to let it to sell the ground and watch someone just trash it. That is what keeps me going, really. Yeah, yeah, but sadly, it doesn't look like any of my family are really interested. They, yeah.
Do you know why that is? Is it just a lifestyle that doesn't appeal to them, or the
I
income?
think it's a lifestyle that didn't appeal to them. The former lifestyle when it was very stressful and milking cows, and they missed that period when they were young of the farm being basically idle and not really doing much. When I was working away, it's basically just somewhere to walk out. They yeah.
You've got to get them into it young. Is that
I think you have,
secret?
yes, yeah. Because conventional farming is very stressful. It's very stressful, and yeah, it is. Yeah,
But there is an opportunity, I think, for the next generation.
I think there is if they change their attitude and don't focus on big is better or get big or get out. Yeah, but you've got to have a real passion. You've got to have a real passion for it.